I am excited about this episode of the Elite Recruiter podcast. I've actually been looking forward to this episode for a while and actually interviewing this guest for a while. So excited about bringing him on. But before we get started, at the time of this recording, I just want to say thank you to the listeners. We've put out 100 episodes. It's been an incredible journey. And now we're averaging like over 10,000 monthly downloads, which is just insane. So I just want to say thank you to every single one of you guys for taking the time to listen to these incredible guests. The guests have been coming on, giving and giving and giving so much great information to the community. So thank you, listeners, and thank you, guests. So, all right, guys, I'm excited about this. For this episode of the Elite Recruiter podcast, I have my special guest, Dom Crosson, who is the president of Spark Packaging. And the reason why I'm excited about bringing Dom on, he's been building this business, scaling his recruiting business, but he really builds everything on core values. And I wanted to bring him on to talk about the core values that he's doing, how they're scaling the business, but how they're staying true to themselves. So welcome, Dom, to the podcast.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me. And thanks to the listeners out there.
And so as we always get started, how did you even end up in this wonderful world of recruiting?
Yeah. So I've listened to a couple of episodes and everybody says I kind of fell into it. And I would say it's probably pretty similar. I got my start in recruiting back in September of 2020 officially, but I've been blessed through my career to be in multiple leadership capacities with different organizations. So I've always been involved in recruiting and hiring, but not on the other side of it. Right. So I think it's boded well to having sit in the other chair to see how the similarities and the synergies kind of work together. But fully in recruiting since September of 2020.
Which that's just insane. And we'll get into your story in a few minutes, but
Yeah.
for the listeners, your company, Spark Packaging, can you talk about that?
Yeah. So we exclusively serve all things packaging. So it doesn't matter what industry it is. So if you get a box shipped to your house from Amazon, the box is being made, the tape that it's being closed with, the containers that it's in, you walk into any grocery store. I did a post recently on the favorite cereal boxes. I'm a Frosted Flakes kind of guy, but our clients are making those products, including the food and beverage space too.
So your niche is just straight packaging then, right?
It is. Yep. That's all that we do.
That is so exciting. And so did your background kind of lead into that niche in recruiting?
It did. It did. So I actually got my start in the industry by running an organization that was an OEM producing flexographic printing presses. So that's how I got my start in the industry. And I fell in love with it. I'm a very hands-on kind of guy. So I was working with our clients directly on machine build out, specifications, qualifications. I loved being on the plant floor with the team to see how things were built, getting out to customers to see how things are running and how they're built. And within that business, we were strictly working with new equipment, but then we slowly started to expand into refurbishing of equipment, service calls, parts, a lot of different things just to make sure that they were available to our customer base.
Awesome. And so how/when and who convinced you? Like, how did you go from like that industrial space to, you know what, one day I want to be a recruiter?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I had worked in, the corporate world for many, many years and one of my best friends and co-founders here, Billy, who worked with me at the OEM specifically, he had went out and in essence started the recruiting side. And there was always a need when we were out at these plants and facilities for people, right? We're selling this new equipment, but it was so tough for them to find somebody who's operated or worked in the niche specifically. So the opportunity is for us, we saw the equipment, but you need people to run the equipment. You can't produce the product unless you have people on the floor. If you don't have the engineers to design the product, there's so many things involved with it. So that's how we shifted into the recruiting side specifically. And that's when I came on board in September of 2020. So that's when I left my corporate job.
And like, where did you like? Okay, so you corporate job, corporate leadership, an OEM packaging space. How did you quickly pick up the dark art of recruiting then?
So a couple things. One, I'm very, very, blessed that I had a lot of very, very good mentors in my life very early on. My dad taught me a very strong work ethic. he was an entrepreneur. He was a carpenter. So at a very young age, I was out on job sites with him, whether it was remodels, tearing things out, taking out the trash. He instilled in me that if you want something, you have to work hard for it. So it's just in my blood that if I find something, I'm going to go all in with it. I'm not a half in, half out kind of guy. So when it was time, it was time. And it's still time today that, we're all in with what we're trying to accomplish. But it's the power of partnerships. If you don't know and understand something, you need the people in your life that have been where you've been and can show you how to do these things. So, with Billy and myself and then Aaron, we had joined, and Aaron really took us under his wing and mentored us in the recruiting space. And it was just the learning curve was just straight down of like, all right, cool. We got to figure this out. Having not been in the recruiting space before. So the power of partnerships is key.
And we'll talk about Aaron a little later on, but for the listeners, Aaron was, I think, guest on episode 7
Mhm.
of the Elite Recruiter podcast, way back when I think like 5 people listened to it outside myself. So, here's a question that I'm kind of curious about. I'm seeing a lot of people, or I've been interviewing a lot of people that like recruiting and owning a recruiting business is almost like their second career. For people out there that have like built an entire career in one place, but have shifted into the recruiting seat and owning a recruiting business or became a recruiter, what advice would you give to that person that's like listening to this, that's thinking about making a 2.0 career shift?
That's a good one. So for me, we talked about core values at the top of the call. And, everybody, in my opinion, has a set of beliefs and core values within themselves. So it's important that as you build your company, your organization, it is surrounded by these core values. One of my personal core values is being of service to others. And I believe that within recruiting specifically, there is no greater way to serve than somebody that's looking for that next opportunity and a client that is trying to fill that position, which is crucial to their operation. So to me, there's no greater way to serve. So if someone's looking to make a shift specifically, first they have to know and understand that when you make a move, it's not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of work that's going to have to be involved. There's going to be a lot of changes, and you have to lean into that discomfort and say, hey, I've got to go and I've got to find a way to make this work. You got to put in the reps. You got to lean on tools, technology, books, mentors, whatever it is to become, for me, obsessed with learning as much as I can in a short amount of time, which for our niche also includes packaging. So being on the forefront of what's going on in the packaging world specifically, so we could be a valuable consultant to our clients. But starting anything new is also understanding, why do you want to get into it? For me, it was the opportunity to serve at a much higher level, right? And the opportunity to create a business for the people around us because the team is critical, right? We put in the work, but because of the team, we're able to scale and grow to the bounds that we have. Without them, it wouldn't be possible. But that's the additional way to serve. So for me, it's all about serving. But within these core values is how you can build the business because it holds everybody to a specific standard. So you got to lean into discomfort. You got to understand what the core values are specifically for you and why you ultimately want to do it. You got to understand that things are going to get tough at times, but you got to stick with it and stick through it and remember why you got started in the first place.
Awesome. Now, when we talk about core values, before we start going into them, the core values that you started with, are they the same core values that you have today, or did they evolve over time?
They are the same with one addition. And
Okay.
we added the addition early on. And I can lean into this one because, we had partnered with the client. We had a specific deadline to accomplish something. And this was very early on in our organization. And we didn't meet the deadline. We committed to it. So we have the core value of execution is a non-negotiable. When we agree to partner with somebody to work on something, the expectation is internally is that we are going to execute for them, plain and simple. So that is one that we did add, but from the beginning to now, they've remained the same.
And what are your core values?
So first and foremost, serve others always. Second is own the outcome, which quick plug to Jocko Willick's book, Extreme Ownership, right? Is what it ties to, that you have to own the outcome, doing the right thing, be humble, create improvement, and execution is non-negotiable.
Awesome. And for a recruiting leader that's
Mhm.
looking at creating core values for their own team or for their own organization, what advice would you give to them on creating this kind of foundational structure for your culture?
Well, I think it should come first and foremost. I mean, this was something that we worked on very, very early on and something that we wanted to be the shape of our organization because it's how we're going to service our clients. It's how we're going to service our candidates. It's how we're going to ultimately build the business to the best of our ability. But then also manage the team and hold ourselves accountable. So doing it very early on is critical. And it starts with what type of legacy do we want to leave and how do we want to build the organization? You know, doing the right thing is just simply doing the right thing. Like it's that simple. It should be what is the right thing to do in this instance, right? And sometimes it may be, we're gonna have to take a financial hit to the organization, but at the end of the day, it's the right thing to do, right? Serving others. When you walk into that interaction, our sole purpose there is to serve. I believe sales is serving. We have a product that we offer. And, I believe, frankly, it's the best out there and the best in the industry, right? But it's our obligation to go and serve, which ties to the other core values as well. But humility is really, really important. We have to remain teachable. So you'd ask, like, hey, what about somebody getting into it? Like, humility is key, especially coming into it, man. I didn't know a whole lot, right? I had to be humble and understand and remain teachable that, listen, I'm going to get this. It just may not be today, but if I keep an open mind, I can accomplish this.
Awesome. And we're going to jump into the teachability a little bit, but want to kind of jump into like scaling. So you guys started your organization. Both you guys came from, I want to say like non-recruiting backgrounds,
Mhm.
but you guys have been scaling your organization with all the growth and the success that you guys are having.
Mhm.
Like, how are you guys scaling?
Yeah. So when it comes to scale, it goes back to the core values, right? As we continue to grow and expand, we're starting to serve more and more people, which in turn is we can serve more and more people internally. But our mission is massive. So the scale is directly tied to what's our mission. And our mission within our family of companies is to create 100,000 opportunities per year. It's a big undertaking. That's a big mission, right? But it guides what we do on a daily basis. So the question is, are we moving towards the goal or are we moving away? So in order to scale and scale quickly with efficiency, of course, and quality, that's the mission that we're on. And if we're not growing, we're moving away from the mission.
So in the GovCon space, we focus on mission a lot, but it's not typically the mission of our organizations. It's the mission of the, on, on the ground army soldier, people over in Afghanistan doing some work with the military. But one of the things I love tying into every single job is the mission.
Mm.
I love that you guys have such a big organizational mission. Can you talk about like maybe creating that or maybe how another organization can like internalize that big mission? Because here's a cool thing that I love about missions. You get this weird energy. It rallies the team. And you know what? I'll let you talk about that.
I mean, you're spot on. Everybody knows and understands what direction that you're going, and it creates this different level of work ethic and drive that's required to achieve the mission. Because what I believe, right, when I look at my core values, I believe that we were all destined to do great things with our lives and to serve others. So there's no reason why we can't accomplish it. We were put here to do amazing things in this world. So why not go and create 100,000 opportunities? That's massive. That's something that we can do, right? So when it's looking at it, one of my mentors told me that you need to think bigger. Whatever you're thinking about, think bigger, right? And thinking big is scary sometimes. And it should scare you, but that's a good thing because it forces you to stay disciplined and focus on the mission, right? Develop those critical lists for the day and those tasks that you've got to get accomplished. And is it moving you forward or is it moving you backwards? But think bigger. That'd be my feedback.
Phenomenal. And I want to get into two more things before we like really jump into it. The next part is partnerships and mentorship.
Mhm.
So like coming from a non-recruiting background, learning the ropes. I know that you guys have partnered with an incredible person.
Mhm.
Do you want to talk about how partnerships have helped you guys become successful? And what's your thoughts on partnerships for other people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when you're looking at anything that is in your life, whether it's business, whether it's fitness, whether it's your faith, Find someone who's doing it and doing it well, someone that you look up to, and ask them how they did it. Now, the question is, are you willing to put in that level of work to achieve the success that they've achieved? But the blueprint's there. You just got to ask, right? So when you look at these partnerships, and it's also a two-way street, if anybody's anything like me, I get a ton of joy from helping people and not expecting anything in return, right? So when you're serving others and you're helping them at the highest level and they go out and they do big things, like that's amazing, right? So when you're looking at a mentorship, what's always served me well is looking at who's doing what I want to do at the highest level, and then how are they doing it? And then looking internally to figure out, am I willing to do that? Am I willing to put in the sacrifice of time, family time, whatever it is, right? Am I willing to make those short-term sacrifices to get to the end result, right? And that ties to the post I did on LinkedIn recently, right? Where, my daughter in cross country, if you stick with it and you focus on where you're going, it's inevitable you're going to get there. It just might not be overnight, but it'll take time. So linking her up with people that are actually running faster than she is to understand, how are they doing it? How are they pacing themselves, right? When they're hitting these certain tracks, how are they doing it? And how are they managing it? You don't have to reinvent the wheel. People have already been there. So it's just a matter of seeking out the right mentors, but also with mentorship is finding like-minded individuals too.
Awesome. And like, where did you find some of your mentors?
So when I was working in, several companies that I worked within, I was very blessed to be on some national teams and some other stuff too. So I had a lot of exposure in a good way, but I always found people that were going out of their way to help others, but also they were in roles that I wanted to be in at some point or learn more about. So I'll use whatever avenues necessary, whether it's a mastermind, whether it's a coaching group, whether it's network, or simply just asking, right? I'm on a whole fitness journey right now, right? I didn't know where to start, but I know my buddy, right? Chris, this is what he used to do. And he's an amazing mentor. I said, hey, who do you know? Guess what? One introduction text and it was done. Right. So you just got to use your network as well to figure out like who knows who to be able to help you get to where you need to get to.
And by the way, like I've seen your fitness journey. Awesome. Incredible.
Thank you.
Like, it made me want to go do some push sit-ups outside my running.
You and me both, brother. I'm trying. I'm trying.
One question I want to ask you is, I know you guys have like been able to get access to some really high level rooms and really high level masterminds. And I know those aren't free, but from the growth that I've seen you guys do, at least on the outside, it seems like a lot of that stuff has had huge impacts. Can you talk about getting around those higher level tables, even if they're, I hate to say this, expensive?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a phrase that comes to mind is you got to pay to play at times, right? And I look at how we got the mentorship initially and working with Aaron, right? As an example, right? When someone has something that you're seeking and can give you the advice to shape years off of your learning curve, you've got to make an investment in that. That's how I look at it, as an investment. And even with masterminds and groups and those things, I look at it as an investment. Is what's the return on investment? How is that going to save us time in business? How is it going to shrink down the learning curve from a recruiting standpoint? And even with packaging, right? I mean, there's certain things that we're looking at right now that are specific to our industry. And those things are indispensable, right? When you look at it, because at the end of the day, they're gonna pay for themselves. So looking at it from the standpoint of an investment, but one of the biggest things that I've learned as well is you have to take what you learn and implement it, right? Not going just to go because it's cool, right? And you can post it on LinkedIn or Instagram or tell people about it. No, you got to take the information and you got to implement it. You have to do something with it. And if you don't, you're just getting the information. But that's actually how we had gotten started was, in working with Aaron was like, hey, teach us. And yes, that is something that he consulted with us on, and it shrunk the learning curve down dramatically for us and shaped years of learning, at least off our plate.
And Aaron is we'll have a link to Aaron's LinkedIn page or his Instagram, but he's an incredible person to follow.
Mhm.
And, I love that you guys were humble enough to not try to reinvent the wheel,
Mhm.
which is amazing.
Yes. I mean, you got to remain teachable, and it's okay to say you don't know. You just got to go find the answer.
Well, before we move over to the next section of the podcast, is there anything else that you would love to share?
I mean, nothing I can immediately think of. I think as we continue to talk on core values and look at it, they drive the business. You got to have a massive mission and vision. You got to think bigger, and looking at different ways to get in these rooms or a seat at the table, and being open to those things as well. That yes, it's a significant investment. Absolutely. But it's an investment. And it's an investment in your future.
That's awesome. And I hate to say this, yeah, thinking about some of those investments and some of those seats at the table and asking for some of that advice, would you guys be where you're at now if you guys didn't do any of that stuff?
No, I think we'd get there eventually. Um, but the short answer is no. And it's been indispensable. And it's amazing the relationships and friendships that you form as a result of people that genuinely want to see you win. It's not a transactional relationship. It's truly, we want to see each other win.
Awesome. Well, moving over to the quick fire questions. I'm actually really excited about asking these. So I know you're hiring new recruiters constantly. So this might be an easy question, but what advice would you give to a listener who's actually just getting started in the recruiting industry this year?
So first is maintain a level of humility. Understand that it's a big elephant. You got to take it bite by bite. Understand that if you're feeling pressure of where you're at isn't far enough, you're probably exactly where you need to be. If you're a high performer, you never thinks enough's enough, right? So, as you're looking at, know and understand that you are on the right path. Latch on and find somebody that is doing the job at a high level and ask them how they're doing it and how they did it. And if you can do those things, it's going to help expedite the learning curve. But, understanding that, hey, am I putting in the work on a daily basis? If I am, and I continue doing those things, I'm going to be okay. But sometimes just taking a step back too and asking for feedback, asking your leader, asking the business unit, it doesn't matter. Hey, how am I doing? And then being humble enough to take the feedback and make the implementations.
Be humble and implement.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, and this is going to be the same question, and I would love your perspective on this. Like, one, you're a newer recruiter, you're newer in the recruiting space, so I think your answer might not be, as I hate to say this, as jaded as somebody that's been around the block for 2 decades.
Mhm.
But what would be your advice to a seasoned recruiter that's looking at either becoming successful or trying to continue their success?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and as you mentioned, I was thinking about like my leadership career because I started in leadership when I was 23. So I was always the youngest guy leading teams, right? So understanding like how do you work with people that have a lot more experience than you? So from a recruiter standpoint, somebody who's more seasoned, who's seeing success in doing these things is, do you think you could be doing more? Is there a little bit more that you could be doing to get a little bit better? So expanding your mind and your knowledge. Are there different things that you could be doing? Right. So as you look at the printing and packaging industry, there's different associations, right? Are you within those associations? Are you involved in those things? So that's the other piece too, is what other things can you get involved with? Whether it's within your local community, like here in Michigan, there's an entrepreneurial network for young entrepreneurs here. Are you getting involved in those type of things? Right. So continue and expand your portfolio and your experience, your network is going to be key. But one of the things too that I would recommend is, who are you mentoring right now? If you're good at what you do and you've been in the industry, who are you taking under your wing to show them the ropes? You know, if you're doing well, leave for the next generation too. Show them what you're doing so they can be successful, keep the legacy of recruiting going.
I love that. That is phenomenal. Well, next question is, has there been a book that's had a huge impact on your career?
Absolutely. My all-time hands down favorite book that I read and reread is Relentless by Tim Grover. Hands down my favorite book. Um,
Right.
And for anybody that doesn't know, Tim Grover was the performance coach for Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant. So to tap into the minds of arguably the two of the best athletes that ever lived, and to get into their mindset and understand how they operate is on a completely different level. But that book also forces you to really do an honest evaluation to say, okay, am I really doing my best? Am I really giving it my all? Right? Am I a cleaner like the book says, or do I just think that I am? Right. But what are the habits and rituals to move into that type of role in areas of your life? But that book, hands down, is one of my all-time favorites.
If you want a good laugh, I actually picked that up and started reading it last night.
Did you? Awesome. You're
Yes.
gonna love it. You're gonna love it. It's amazing.
I read his one of his other books a few years back, and I think this is going to sound stupid, but you know, maybe the first like 10 years of my recruiting career, I was like, if the person hasn't done it, they can't teach me. They can't be a coach. But then I read, I started seeing people like Tim Grover, and I'm like, well, technically, Tim Grover was not a Michael Jordan or a Kobe Bryant or a LeBron James, but he's done such a good job learning the space, learning everything, that he's such a phenomenal coach to some of the best athletes in the world. So it made me like reevaluate, I hate to say this, coaches.
It's true. I absolutely agree with you. And there's some coaches out there that may not be a good fit for you, right? Or somebody, but it's finding that right one that fits, but they can also push you. And when they push you, it's out of love and knowing that you have more to give.
Awesome. So what's your thoughts about artificial intelligence and recruiting and the future of recruiting?
It's interesting, right? I'm still getting my arms around AI and how it impacts, the recruiting space and just industries in general, right? I definitely think that there's a lot of complements to what we do on the recruiting side specifically. Um, but one of the things that I believe is that people love human to human interaction, so, I don't know about you, but when I get an email or something, I know it's AI generated because you can just tell it to copy and paste it, right? So how I feel about it is if you're going to use the tool, right, leave a little bit of human interaction in it as well. Make it your own, right? Would be my one piece of advice, but I'm really interested to see how it's going to continue to evolve and change because it's just the growth of it's been insane, at least from what I've seen over the past 12 months.
Do you have a favorite like recruiting tech tool that you love at the moment?
I love LinkedIn. It's hands down one of my favorite tools. You get to connect with so many people. You get to get to know them more on a personal level as well, which is really, really cool. You get to see what their companies are doing. So, if a company has like one of our clients today just posted about an annual, employee appreciation day, right? Like that's so cool to see, those type of things and they're actually doing it. But you can stay on the forefront of all this stuff with articles and information and it's one of the largest networks because we work on a lot of professional level roles as well. So it's by far one of the largest professional networks out there.
You can't beat it. Every time we talk about like what might be the LinkedIn killer, LinkedIn destroys everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
What do you think has been a major part of your own personal success?
Mm. Well, one, amazing mentors, has been a huge part of it. The other part of it too is not shutting my mind off to other possibilities. Meaning, is there a better way of doing it? Is the way that I'm thinking about this maybe not right? Is there an easier or better way to do this? So having an open mind has been key. And, for me, I have a relentless pursuit of the result, of what our mission is. So I am laser focused and locked in on that on a daily basis. And it doesn't matter what area of my life it is, whether it's business, family, faith, fitness, whatever that goal is of what I'm trying to accomplish and the standards that I hold myself to, is key. The disciplines carry over on the days when, frankly, you don't want to do some of the things that you to do because it's necessary.
Awesome. And this next question, I'm going to ask it two ways.
Mhm.
I'm going to ask it from the very beginning of your career, and then I'm going
Mhm.
to re-ask it again at the very beginning of your recruitment career.
Mhm.
So with everything that you know now, all the experiences, the ups and the downs, if you could sit down and have a cup of coffee with yourself when you just started off your career, like, maybe getting out of college, what advice would you sit down and give yourself?
Man, that's a good one. If I were to go back and have coffee with myself, I would tell myself to keep doing exactly what you're doing and everything's going to work out just the way it's supposed to. Because there's times early on in my career where I started my career working in a warehouse driving a forklift. I was working 3 jobs to put myself through school. There's times when it got really, really tough. Right. And there's times when I wanted to give up early in my career and say, nah, I need to go a different direction. I was pre med when I started college, by the way. So I went from pre med to business like that. Right. So I would tell myself, listen, just trust the process. Everything's going to work out just the way it's supposed to. Um, and you're going to do great things, man. I truly believe we're all going to do great things in our lives.
Awesome. And same question, but think about it from your first day as in the recruiting chair, the first day that you like president of your organization. If you can go back with everything that you've learned and talk to yourself and give yourself advice, what would you tell yourself?
That's a really good one. A really, really good one. Because I think that, we've truly operated by our core values. We've expanded our team as a result, and I think as we continue to look at it, if I first, got started into it, because, there's times when you're starting a business where things get really, really rough, you know, and if I had to go back and just tell myself one thing, it's keep going, just keep moving, keep that level of humility, work with the people that you have right now. Because our founding team is amazing and we all get along so, so well. We have our own different skills and that, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to accomplish this mission. Right. But if I had to go back and tell myself anything and just be like, listen, man, it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it.
And one last question I have is for the people out there that have like recruiting is their second career.
Mhm.
What advice would you give to them on honing down on your background to become the niche that you are mastering?
I think it just depends too, because I've been blessed to have worked in, different areas and different roles in leadership and then just also with my background. So got a pretty diverse experience portfolio with different things. So I guess I'll tie it back to myself and then hopefully this helps others. But understanding how does your experience complement what you're trying to do, right? So having looking at and conversing with, let's say, a plant manager as an example. I've been there, right? I managed a union team. So I can relate to what someone may be going through in that particular instance. So from my perspective is really tapping into your experience and flipping it in a way of like, hey, how can I use this to serve this person in this instance? And really trust in the fact that you can bring value. Because at times we walk into it, or like, I really don't know if I can bring value here. I don't know. I'm walking into this room. I've never been around these people before, right? That's okay. You're there for a reason. You can do it, right? So understanding how does your experience complement what you're trying to do ultimately. And in that case, right, it's a little bit easier for me to talk to somebody because I've been in their shoes in that particular instance, right? And it's no different than if you have a recruiting team, we've all started out in positions too. We know what it's like. We know the things that you go through. It just may have been a little bit earlier in our careers, but it's no different than today, right? So understanding, okay, what is my background? How does it complement? And sometimes it may not just be like the intangible skills. It may be the fact that you have leadership qualities that you've never been able to deploy in a true leadership capacity in your previous organization. Cool. You have a great opportunity to do it now. So understanding what are your strengths and using those as you continue on the path of where you're going.
Awesome. Phenomenal. Well, Dom, before I let you go, is there anything else that you would love to share with the listeners?
Nothing I could think of. I thought the questions were absolutely amazing. I absolutely love, Ben, what you're doing. Congratulations on the 100th episode as well. I mean, that's huge. And it's a blessing that we have people like you that live the mission, go out there and are just looking to help others. And it's amazing. So, I'd recommend if you haven't listened to the other episodes that you go do that.
Awesome. Well, Dom, definitely thank you for coming on. Excited to share. Yeah, it's one of the things that I think like a lot of times I'm just going to tell my story myself. Like we started with some of these core missions. We started with some of these values. We started with this mission, this idea, but listening to Dom talk about this, it's a great like rejuvenation to like go back and like, okay, this was some of the things that I was chasing. This is some of the core values that I was building my company on. So for the listeners, I hope you're doing the exact same thing. So Dom, thank you for joining me on the podcast. And for the listeners, keep crushing it, guys. One placement can change your life.